I'm Andy Erwin, and this is the Storytellers. Coming up on this edition of the Storytellers is somebody that I have been mentored by and has been a dear, dear friend, and I think is the single greatest igniter of what we've been able to do at Kingdom Story Company. This is a guy that believed in us way earlier than anybody else did, and has significant influence, and has used that influence over the years to impact other storytellers along the way, to kind of really find their voice. And then secondly, has used all of his influence to pour it into things that really matter for our military and first responders, and just so many amazing things that he's involved in. He's an Oscar-nominated actor that has also won Emmys and Tonys. He started the kind of sacred Steppenwolf Theater in Chicago, and has done amazing things. You know him from movies like Forrest Gump, Apollo 13, The Green Mile, CSI New York. And we're going to take our time with this show today. So we're going to actually take a little bit more time with this one, because there was so much that we wanted to talk about. But would you welcome my dear friend, Gary Sinise?
Hey, thanks, Andy. Good to be here, bud.
Man, it's good to see you face to face. It's been a little bit, since we've been able to kind of see each other in person, and you walking in the doors this made my day.
Thanks. Well, we communicate a lot, but
Yeah.
we don't see each other a lot.
I know. You followed us to Tennessee because I begged you. There was a bunch of us that were begging you that, hey, Nashville's where it's at. So you're here. Foundation is set up. How are you? How has Tennessee been treating you?
I'm glad to be here. I love it. I love the state. And there's so many supporters of our military and veterans.
Yeah.
And very supportive community here. It feels really right for the Gary Sinise Foundation to be here.
I mean, we've been honored to have you, and because of the work that you're doing, so important. In fact, the thing that I loved is when you were looking at moving here, you had already kind of started the foundation moving here. You came to town, and we went to breakfast, and I guess probably no less than 10 people stopped you at breakfast and came over to say hello, but they didn't come over to look for a picture with an actor. They came over, every single one of them was like, thank you for what you do for our veterans. And I was like, Gary, you're among friends here. This is your people.
Yeah. No, I knew that as soon as we walked out of the restaurant. I said, I think I'm going to like it here.
Yeah, right. They're very pro everything you do here. For you've had that kind of an impact for so many of us that have been in entertainment, and have been kind of definitely a kind of a big brother or father figure to a lot of us that have kind of gotten into this. Not just because of your work. I mean, what you do as an actor, you're an actor's actor. You're great at what you do. But because of what you've done behind the scenes, I'll never forget us meeting for the first time. Do you remember the first time that you and I, that we got together?
Well, I remember we went out to a lunch or a breakfast.
Cafe
remember.
Marmalade in Thousand Oaks.
So I lived up there and had you come out, and then we sat down. And I remember reaching out to you because I had seen October Baby,
Right.
And I thought I want to know who these filmmakers are. These two guys from Alabama. They're probably going to need some friends here in Hollywood. So.
We definitely did. We definitely did, because we set out to just make a story that kind of showed some hope and some good in the world, and try to kind of share a perspective of what we believed. And we did this little tiny indie film, October Baby, for a micro budget. And I get from John Schneider, John connected us, and he's like, hey, Gary Sinise wants to reach out to you. I was like, you talking about like the Gary Sinise? Like Lieutenant Dan? I'm like, yes, you can connect us. So he connected us. But that morning at breakfast, when we're waiting in that restaurant, I fully was convinced that we were going to meet with some other guy named Gary Sinise, and it wasn't going to be the real one. It'd be like some guy that has the same name. And then you walked in, and I was dumbfounded. I'm like, being from Alabama and never being around the industry much. And you sat down and just started talking. And I remember I said, Gary, we started talking about October Baby, that you'd liked it. And I said, well, because we've put our faith out there, because we put some of our values out there, we feel like we're going to, get blacklisted. And you just assured us that there was a lot of like-minded people in the industry that we could trust. and you just kind of put your arm around us as a big brother, and just kind of helped us to take courage not to compromise who we were and what our voice was. And you've done that for a lot of people. Where did that passion come from to really want to impact people behind the scenes? Because I was a nobody back then. There was no reason for you to reach out to us, but you just had a heart that, hey, I really believe in these guys.
Well, I could tell your values were embedded in the story and in the that you had made there with October Baby, and I liked it. And both my wife and I enjoyed the film. Thought the film was good. And look, there's all kind. It takes all types. There's not one set of rules in Hollywood. Although sometimes it might feel like that, but I have certain values and certain beliefs and faith and all of that. And I remember years ago, and it felt like, well, I wasn't sure personally for me if I was going to kind of be alone in that or not. And sure enough, I just started to discover a lot of pals out there and get them together and introduce them to each other. And so I was quite used to that by the time I sat down with you.
Yeah.
And it was something that I was the way that's the way I would do it. I would notice something that somebody had done or something that somebody had said that kind of made me kind of stand up and look a little deeper, and then I would just personally reach out and say, hey, let's get together and talk. And that was great. And now look where you are with all those folks you met, and you've worked with many of them over the years, and all of that.
For me at least, your voice was the first one that told us that we had value. You just said, hey, you've been given a voice. You don't have to apologize for who you are. Tell stories that really matter. And you just encouraged us. You didn't tell us what to say. You didn't tell us what to do. You just encouraged us to not lose heart and to kind of stay the course. And introduced us to a lot of friends that were, like-minded, that have been good friends over the years. And so I'm super grateful for that. For you, and it's amazing to find the other people that you've impacted along the way. I remember when we were doing I Can Only Imagine, I was riding, the streets of New York with Dennis Quaid, and he points to the theater that we passed on the way. He's like, yeah, I did a play there once, with my brother Randy. And I was like, who directed it? And he's like, Gary Sinise. I'm like, no way. And then I texted you to ask about it, and then you sent me a picture from the play of Randy Quaid strangling his brother in the play, and then a shot of a very young you sitting on stage. Your theater roots, like Steppenwolf, is legendary. Like, I talk to theater people all the time, and they're like, forget about Gary Sinise, the film actor. Like, Steppenwolf is like sacred ground. Like, where did your love of theater come from, and what led you to start Steppenwolf?
Yeah, high school. I mean, I was a few years ago. Let's see, 4 years ago, something. I wrote a book, Grateful American, and in the book, I tell the story of how I got kind of stumbled into the acting thing. I was not doing well in school academically. I was struggling. It was a tough time in the early 70s. I was during the Vietnam War, and that was a tough time back then. And I was certainly just bumbling around, playing music and really almost failing school. And I met the drama teacher who was directing West Side Story, and she just told me I looked like a gang member and I should come and audition. So I did.
Which part did you get in West Side Story?
I don't even think I had a line. I think I had a word.
A word.
Yeah.
You got your word in.
I said something, and but I got to dance, and I got to rumble, and I got to do all that.
Yeah.
And I just fell in love with it, and fell in love with the kids in the drama department, and just all of a sudden this, I had been a kid who was searching and bumbling around, just playing music and almost failing school. And then I found this theater department community of kids that I just really liked, and they all liked me, and I just that's what I wanted to do. So what I did was get some kids together as soon as I graduated, and we just picked a play, and we found a little church space, and we went in there and started doing plays, and that was the beginning of Steppenwolf Theater. 50 years ago,
Man.
right now, Andy.
Oh
My
my-
God, I just realized
My gosh.
it was probably February or March of 1974
Oh,
that
my
Steppenwolf did our first play. And
I
now
just got chills. I
Yeah.
just got chills.
I-
That's
I ju-
incredible.
I just realized that.
So to come from something like that became an institution and took up so much of your time, and then you move over to film in the mid 80s and you're doing film, and then eventually you kind of work your way to the director's chair to Of Mice and Men, and you direct it, you act in it, and to do that, you were like 32 when you did that? Maybe?
Well, Andy, you're putting me on the spot here.
Sorry.
Let's see. Yeah,
Sounds good.
well, let's see. That was, I did it in 1991.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Round
in my 30s. I had directed another movie before that.
Okay.
Called with Richard Gere.
Oh yeah. Okay. I read about
Yeah,
this. Yeah.
yeah.
I haven't seen this one.
Called Miles from Home. It's
Yeah.
about two brothers on a farm. I directed a couple of episodes of a TV series called Crime Story.
Okay.
And
CSI, huh? Full circle.
Crime Story. Let's see. That was about like 60s gangsters and cops in Chicago.
That's
back
awesome.
back in the 60s. And so I directed a couple episodes of that. Michael Mann produced that show. That kind of got my feet wet, and then
That's a good one to learn from.
And I remember delivering my first cut, and it was way too long and everything like that. And Michael Mann was like, "What am I looking at here?" Like, we only have 42 minutes, to put on television.
Episode's
here.
4 hours.
Yeah, what are you showing me? So I learned a little bit about, don't just. I was of the mindset, well, I'll just give them, show them what we've got here, and then we'll figure it out later. No, that's not what
awesome.
Somebody like Michael Mann who's running a show, he'd love to see the finished product, so he doesn't have to think about it anymore. When I had the opportunity to do Of Mice and Men, I feel like I was a much more confident director with Of Mice and Men. Plus, I knew the story really well.
Yep.
It was a personal story I loved in high school.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I'd done it on stage with John Malkovich. We'd acted. I just knew it inside out. I asked Elaine Steinbeck, who was Steinbeck's widow. She controlled all the rights to all his stuff after he died. And I knew her because we had done an adaptation of The Grapes of Wrath on stage, and I got to know her. And I asked her if she'd give me the rights to Of Mice and Men. She did.
That's amazing.
Yeah, she just gave me the rights. I had the rights for free for 1 year if I could set it up. And I set it up at MGM.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I mean, she liked me. we got along great. She liked me a lot. She said she did say, "Honey, it's been a film 2 times already." And I said, "Well, I think I could make a good movie out of it." And I knew the story really well. Malkovich and I had done it already on stage. And so I was blessed to get Horton Foote to write the screenplay.
Yep.
I produced it with my friend Russ Smith, and MGM did it. It came out in 1992. And I think that's sort of what teed me up for some pretty big acting roles.
Yeah, I mean, right after that's where the floodgates kind of opened up, and I think Of Mice and Men. I think your version of it's my favorite one that's ever been done. Like I just think it holds up. It really holds up, and in fact, and we'll get to this in a minute. But having worked on a movie where I got a chance to direct you was always intimidating. It's like Gary Sinise directed Of Mice and Men. This is a guy that can do my job. Like if I passed out, he could take over this movie and do it just fine. And so,
I'm glad you didn't pass out.
Yeah, exactly. But for you, Forrest Gump coming along and that being kind of the defining thing for your early career. And to this day, the name Lieutenant Dan sticks with you with your band and all the things that you've done. It's an iconic role in an iconic movie. When you got cast in that with Tom Hanks, did you guys really get a sense of the movie that Bob Zemeckis was making, or were you guys this kind of along the way being like, what is this thing? Because I mean, I'm sure when you're making it, it would be hard to imagine because there was nothing else to compare it to at the time. It must have been like, what are we actually making here? And then to see it come together.
We weren't sure at a certain point. That was a great year though, because I had done after Of Mice and Men, things started to open up. I mean, I wanted to get into the film business. There's no question about it.
Sure.
I wanted, and I was trying the audition thing and all of that. I was trying to get out there. It was really Of Mice and Men, having control over a project like that on your own, where you're producing, you're directing, you're working with the writer, you're acting in it, all of that. That was like okay, this guy's got, there's some seriousness here.
Right.
He's interested in making stories. And I think that caught the attention of Stephen King and the director of The Stand, Mick Garris.
Yep.
And they asked me to do The Stand. And right after I did The Stand, I auditioned for Forrest Gump. They had seen Of Mice and Men as well. And so they brought me in. I didn't hear anything for a while because they were seeing other people and all that. I eventually heard back that they wanted me to do the movie, which was great. I had been involved with like Vietnam veterans work going back into the mid 80s. So Gump was 1993 when I auditioned for it. We started shooting in 1993, fall of 1993. But prior to that, going back into the mid 80s, I had been working with Vietnam veterans and, so when Gump came along, the opportunity to play a Vietnam veteran, I just really wanted to do it. And when I got it, that was an important thing. We went to South Carolina, to Beaufort, South Carolina. I remember, certain, bunch of meetings with Bob Zemeckis, just a genius of a guy. I mean,
what an imagination.
I mean, aren't many people that can think up things like Bob can. He's a visionary, and he's always thinking of like new things he can do. He's great with craft, for sure. But he'd also done Roger Rabbit.
Yep. Back to the Future.
And Back to the Future.
Yep.
And these sort of big cartoony, wild things. And Bob has a very wild kind of sense of humor. He can be like a big cartoon himself. And so when he would describe things to us sometimes and what he wanted, he would go really big, like Roger Rabbit or,
so you don't know if you're like doing like a serious piece of drama that became an Oscar, winning performance for, Tom Hanks. Or if you're doing the Saturday morning cartoons, like it's probably a little bit of a blur in between of like, what are we actually making here?
I remember I think when we went out to do some shrimping, right? Before we shot the shrimping stuff, we did various things to get ready, right? Like we did a boot camp for the Vietnam soldier stuff.
Right.
We lived out in the woods for 3 or 4 days and trained and all that. And then with the shrimping, we went out on the shrimp boat and just kind of to figure out what we were doing out there. And they took us out, and I was out there with, I think Michael T. was out there too.
Yep.
Michael T. Williamson and Tom. Even though Michael T. didn't have any shrimp stuff, I think he came on the shrimp boat. And we just went out there to see how to shrimp, what they were doing. And I do remember like a conversation between the three of us is, what kind of movie do you think? What kind of, because sometimes Bob, I'm not sure if he wants me to be big and cartoony or little or real or whatever. We weren't quite sure. So we just went with our impulses and followed Tom, and Tom was funny, really funny, but he was also so genuine in how he portrayed Gump. So we just went with our instincts and our impulses. Yet, if you look at the movie, Andy, the movie is like all these separate stories going on,
Yep.
right? So they were all shot sort of separately. I mean,
So Bob was the only one that knew how all the pieces fit together.
well,
Bob and Tom.
that's what I'm saying. I didn't go to like dailies and watch what they were shooting, what everybody was shooting.
Right.
So I had no idea what the other people were doing in the movie until I saw it all put together in this beautiful classic,
Yeah.
And I remember that day that they brought us together right before it was going to premiere for the public, and we were going to have the big splashy Hollywood premiere and everything. They put us together in a small screening room at Paramount with the cast and some of the principal folks that had worked on it, and we watched it for the first time. Everybody, the lights came up at the end, and everybody was smiling, big smiles, because everybody knew it was just fantastic.
I mean, what you guys did with that film to go from places that were genuinely comical and funny and over the top and almost fairy tale like, and then to take it to these moments that are so earned and so grounded, and so dramatic. Like, I think you're seeing in the rainstorm on the shrimping boat, kind of yelling at God, kind of getting, what you felt out between you and God, was a beautifully dramatic scene that really grounded, that moment. And there were things that were earned, and it was just something that walked that tightrope really, really well, that I don't think you can put it in a category.
Yeah, I was talking, recently Bob called me.
Did he?
Just to check in after everything. And we got to talking about it. And he's made, many, many movies since then. But that one is always going to be a special one in that you just look at all the elements. It's one of those moments where all the elements come together at the same time. You've got a tremendously perfect score by Alan Silvestri. Like absolutely. The music is, you can't think of a more perfect score than that. And the way it looks, the production design, the script is beautiful on that. Mm-hmm. It's beautifully played, with all the actors, and just everything came together on that one. And Bob is, Bob pulled it all together. Him and Tom, really, they pulled it all together.
Well, I want to get to Tom in a second, but I know that I always love when I come to your office, because the studio, I guess, when the film was over, gave each of the stars is a replica of the bench from the movie. And I would always love to come to your office and just kind of sit on that bench. I don't know if I felt like I was going to absorb some sort of filmmaking power from it, but it was always so charming to kind of see, for you and Tom, you guys went on to make 2 other movies together, with Apollo 13 and Green Mile. And, what is it about Tom as an actor, just kind of explaining actor? What is it about Tom that makes him so timeless? He's almost like our generation's Jimmy Stewart. There's something about him that transcends. What is it, in your opinion, of Tom as your friend that makes him connect the way he does?
It's really interesting when you look at the beginning of his career, right? It's really focused on comedy and, bosom buddies and
big,
these wonderful comedies that he did, Splash, and some of the other ones. And there was a time right when I was, starting to work with Tom, where he was making a pretty big transition into more dramatic roles that he wanted to play. Philadelphia, he just won the Oscar, I think, when we were starting to shoot, or something, or getting ready to make the movie. I can't remember, but he was. And then all along comes Gump, and then he's got Castaway, he's got Saving Private Ryan, he's got one. Pretty powerful thing after another during that period. And he just has a great sense of, honesty about him, I think. And he's, when he's working, he's always thinking a little bit ahead, it seemed to me. And he's very prepared, keeps you on your toes, that kind of actor, And I remember meeting Tom when I was doing The Grapes of Wrath. We did The Grapes of Wrath in 1988.
Yep.
in Chicago, and then in '89 we did it in La Jolla, California, and London. And when we were in La Jolla, California, he had known one of the actors in the show
Yeah.
from something he was doing in Ohio. You know, Tom grew up in Ohio, I think, and he knew one of the actors in our show, so he came backstage, and I met him back there.
Yep.
Very genuine, very, very nice. And within, just a few years, I was going to be, I was working with him as his career was going, making a transition from sort of, just comic actor to more leading man and, doing a powerful drama. It was, he's just got a universal quality about him that he can kind of put himself in any situation, be able to do it.
Yeah, it's been amazing to see that morph over the years. One of the other things I want to ask you about, and then I want to kind of transition into a few other things to do with your foundation. But, I find it fascinating when somebody that has sat in the director's chair works for, another director. And, I talked a little bit with Randall Wallace on previous episode of talking about going from writing for Mel Gibson and Braveheart to directing Mel Gibson and We Were Soldiers, and just that transition. You had an opportunity to kind of be a fly on the wall and be a part of that because you've directed yourself, but you're on Ransom where Ron Howard's directing, but Mel Gibson had just won the Oscar for Braveheart, I believe, and you guys are doing that film together. What was it like having, two directors serving another director, and like what was the fly on the wall experience of that?
I never.
Did you ever rib him at all, or?
There is one story. I never, Mel's super smart and really, he's very good. But Ron was the director of that movie, and Mel, he'd acted in enough movies with other directors that he knew, he didn't want to be directing Ransom. That's for sure. He was glad Ron was there. But I do remember coming in the morning that the morning after Mel had won the Oscar. And we were in a scene. I think we were doing a scene in Mel's office at the end of the movie. It's very tense and everything. And Ron was doing some directing and talking to both of us. And I at one point I said, "Wait a minute, Ron. Should I be asking Mel what he thinks right now about this scene?"
Well, I was proud of you because getting a chance to work with you on I Still Believe, and we wrote that role for you, and having you on set, I would lean over and you'd be like, asking me a few questions, and I'd be like, "Gary, what would you do here?" And I just kind of lean into like, "What do you think? How would you?" And it was fun because we only had so much time with you, and so the first scene up was a very intense kind of conversation that's kind of the grounding father moment in the story between Jeremy and his father. So it was you and KJ Apa as a young actor, and we had a debate amongst ourselves of like, do we put that later to where Gary has time to get to know KJ to earn that scene, or do we just go right at it? And I was like, and I was the deciding vote, and I said, no, we go right at it. I said, because Gary's a fantastic actor, and I believe I can throw him in the deep end, and he will forge an instant bond with KJ, and that will inform the entire rest of the performance. And I said, so I trust Gary enough to not have to baby him into this moment, but just throw him in and let him go for it. And you killed it. And when I came out, the treat for me was coming to Video Village after being on set. I walked out, and the entire cast of actors had come to set. People that weren't even scheduled that day showed up to set to watch the monitors, and they were all leaning in because they were like, "This is a masterclass." And there's just such a tremendous respect that I don't think because you don't seek it out, so you don't see it a lot of times. But me being your friend and just being a fly on the wall, I get a chance to see it of the people that are watching what you do because they respect the kind of person you are, but they also respect the talent that you are. And so I got a chance to see just a glimpse of that that day. For you, you went on to do CSI New York and kind of get back to your crime TV roots, and you're able to do that for an extended period of time. But in the midst of all this, in the early 2000s, the thing that really shifted the trajectory of what you do was 9/11. And that made a significant impact on you and kind of the focus of the purpose behind what you do. What kind of impact did that moment have on you?
Significant. Yeah. As I said, in the 80s, I got very involved supporting Vietnam veterans. My wife's got two brothers who served in Vietnam, and her sister had served in the Army, married a Vietnam veteran. So three brothers-in-law served in Vietnam. I learned quite a bit from them back in the early 80s and started kind of focusing on trying to support Vietnam veterans back then. Then I played one in Forrest Gump. That was significant, and that led me to I got a call maybe 4 weeks after Gump or something, and it was the DAV, the Disabled American Veterans, invited me to their national convention.
Mhm.
They wanted to give me an award for playing Lieutenant Dan, and I didn't know what the DAV was, but I walked out on the stage, and there's 2,000 wounded veterans out there.
Wow.
It's the Disabled American Veterans.
Wow.
These are, I think there was something like 1.5 million wounded
Man.
veterans going
Wow.
back to World War II that were a part of the DAV all
Wow.
across the country. And this was their national convention where all their chapters from all over the country
Yeah.
come in, and they're all represented. And they gave me an award, their National Commanders Award, which I don't know that they give that out every year, but they wanted to recognize that, a wounded Vietnam veteran was being portrayed in a way that they felt was kind of a positive way, because if you look at that story, Lieutenant Dan is moving on at the end. He's not collapsing and falling apart and
Well, you
drunk.
kind of breathe life back into his soul, and then he kind of, when he jumps off the boat and starts swimming, you're just like, he's free. He can just be his own
free.
person.
And that's a beautiful scene, beautiful metaphor.
Yeah,
when
gorgeous metaphor.
when he makes his peace with God there.
Yep.
And so many of our Vietnam veterans came home and they got lost, and they really had trouble moving forward. Not only, there were a couple of things happening. The war had really done some damage, obviously, but then coming home to the war at home, where the nation was kind of turning its back on our Vietnam veteran, that made it all the worse. So a lot of Vietnam veterans just withdrew and couldn't, found it difficult to move forward. And that was the way it was being portrayed in a lot of Hollywood movies. If you look at it, how many Vietnam movies can you name? Apocalypse Now, Platoon, Casualties of War, Coming Home, one after another. And you look at the Vietnam veterans at the ends of those films, and you kind of just shake your head and you don't think they're going to be okay. And you wonder whether they're going to be okay. The deer hunter, one of them commits suicide. At the end of Coming Home, one of them swims out in the ocean and he's not coming back. You really felt like the Vietnam story was only the story of somebody who couldn't return and be okay. And then along comes Forrest Gump.
Wow.
Right? And Lieutenant Dan goes through all this stuff, coming home from Vietnam. He's bitter, he's angry, he's isolated, he's drinking, he's mad at God, he's blaming, he's going through all that, and through this love of a friend and everything, he makes his peace with God, and he's able to move on. And he's a wealthy businessman at the end of the movie. And we hadn't seen that story about a Vietnam veteran.
Man, I haven't thought of it that way. That's incredible.
You'd never really seen that story of a Vietnam veteran who was whole again.
Yeah.
Even Lieutenant Dan. You've seen him in the wheelchair wheeling around. His hair is all crazy and everything like that. He's mad. And then at the end of the story, he's standing up on legs again. Huh. He's clean shaven.
Gotten his dignity back.
He pulls up in a limousine.
Yeah. That's incredible.
He's married.
Yeah.
He's made peace in so many different ways. And that was a positive story of a Vietnam veteran that we hadn't seen. So the DAV wanted to recognize that by inviting me to their national convention and sort of celebrating that. And that was a powerful, powerful moment for me to go out onto that stage and look out in that audience and see, 2,000 wounded veterans, some in wheelchairs, some on crutches. The guy who gave me the award, Richard Marbs, with the national commander at that time, he's missing a leg all the way up to his hip.
Wow.
And he's standing on crutches, and you can see the picture.
Wow.
Where he's handing me the award, and he's standing on a crutch, missing a leg. So many, many wounded veterans at that event, and that had a profound effect on me as I went forward. And so I felt like at 9/11, when that happened, I was just sort of teed up to do something more specific and take a broader action to help our deploying troops to Afghanistan and Iraq get through that experience. I didn't want them to come home like our Vietnam veterans came home and be spit on. And you could see back, if you look back in 2004, 2005, 6, the country, really got behind the president after 9/11. We wanted to pull together, and then as time went on and we went into Iraq, things got a little trickier. I didn't want our troops deploying to Iraq to get caught up in the bad, media coverage or, politics or anything like that. So I really got aggressive about going out there and trying to help them. Raised my hand for the USO, starting a band, taking the band around, playing.
And the band's called the Lieutenant Dan Band.
Yeah, the band's called the Lieutenant Dan Band because, over 20 years ago when I started taking them, I hadn't done CSI New York. I was just getting, and I wasn't, while I had done some movies, Ransom and Gump and some of these other ones, I was still, not a well-known name or anything like that. When you're on television for 9 seasons every night, people get used to you a little bit more and they get to know your name. But up until that point, people didn't know. So I thought, well, let's name the band after the character that people know, right?
Yeah.
People know Lieutenant Dan. So they might put 2 and 2 together and figure out that it's me that's coming to play for them. And we did that. And then I started volunteering for all kinds of nonprofits that were out there trying to help our troops. And eventually in 2011, I just founded the Gary Sinise Foundation as an extension of what I'd been doing for years.
It's fascinating to watch, and then over the past decade and a half, to watch the foundation start from a humble place to just the work that you guys are doing now is just so huge. I mean, it just like the millions of dollars of resources that have flowed out to helping build homes for wounded warriors and for different programs to help rehabilitate and reintroduce, our military coming back from deployment to give them opportunities, and then for first responders as well, not just military, but also, our police forces and firemen and different things like that. I've been to a lot of your fundraisers, we've supported it over the years. And I've been to the concerts that the Lieutenant Dan band plays, for these military bases, and I've been to a few of them, and it's an amazing experience because some places you'll play, there'll be tens of thousands of people gathered in like a field at the military base.
I'm not in it for my own ego or to make money or anything like that. I've played 560 concerts and never made a dime. In all those concerts, I think the fact that I have band members with me that go back 20 years or more and have stayed with the band just says something about how the purpose of the mission and how the spirit of the mission is really something that makes sense to everybody and that they enjoy and appreciate.
Yeah.
And they recognize in me that I'm not there. The only reason I'm there is for the troops. I mean, we've played a few concerts that maybe don't have anything to do with the military. Maybe I'll play a corporate gig or something like that. And I'll play the corporate gig so that I'll make the corporation donate the money to the Gary Sinise Foundation so that we can go play for the troops. That allows me to call up a base like I did when we were shooting I Still Believe.
Yeah,
If
you were
you
like
recall.
on the weekends. You're at the military base
Yeah.
playing a show.
Well,
I've got footage of it on my iPhone.
Yeah, I said we're going to be in Mobile, Alabama. There's got to be I'm sure there's a Coast Guard base there. I look and I find the Coast Guard base. I call them up. I say I'm going to be there. How about we come over on a Sunday or something? Because I
Yep.
knew I'd have a day off, and we set that up so I can call those bases, or my team can call those bases, and we can offer support to them, just like we do on a regular basis in many different areas. We serve food all over the country and overseas. It's not so much about the food that we serve, but it's about the message that
Yep.
the food brings, which is we don't forget about you. We care about you. We
Yep.
appreciate you. And just traveling, so I could name a million
Yeah.
different things over the years, Andy, but so much of it goes back to the Vietnam veterans who didn't get that kind of support. And the things that I learned back in those 80s through my wife's
Yeah.
brothers about what it was like to not feel appreciated from your country.
Yeah.
And so we do things at the Gary Sinise Foundation that are all about lifting people up and making them feel appreciated.
Well, and I think that's the biggest gift that you give our military is, yes, you're meeting tangible needs through partnering with different organizations that do those things. But the thing I think that you've done is in a day and age in Hollywood where it hasn't been the popular thing sometimes to stand by, military and first responders, you have unapologetically and unflinchingly stood behind them and said, "I'm with you and I see you." And I think that it's the same thing that you did for me as a young filmmaker. It's just saying, "I see you and I'm with you and I've got your back." And there's something that gives tremendous courage to people that need allies. And I think you've done that over the years. And then with your music, I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about, because I know that music has a powerful connection, especially now. Your drummer for the band for a number of years was your son Mac, and Mac was a special soul that anybody that met him went away very, very impacted just by his spirit. And I've had the privilege as your friend of watching you over the past 6 years walk through his battle with a rare spine cancer. And this year we lost Mac. And I've, tried to just, along with a lot of your friends, be there in that with you. But one of the things that you got to do with Mac before he passed is he was an amazingly talented musician, songwriter, and he had music that he wanted to share with the world. And you guys made a priority to make that happen with him before he passed. Tell me a little bit about that and the album that's coming out and just the response. Because you just announced, I've known for a little while what had happened with Mac, as some of your close friends had, but you announced it to it kind of came out to the media just recently. And there's been an outpouring of love, I know, for you and for him. And then the music being a part of that. Just kind of walk me through a little bit of that.
Yeah, Andy. I mean, it's been he was diagnosed with a very rare tumor called chordoma in the summer of 2018. And quite often when they will diagnose this, and it starts in the spine, either in the base of the spine or the top of the spine, these chordomas, and about 70% of the time they can take that initial tumor out and it'll be cured. It won't come back, or 30% of the time it'll come back, and we got hit with that. So in May of 2019, I found out that the cancer had come back. Ironically, that was right around the time that I was going to work with you on I Still Believe, a story about cancer and taking.
It hit really close to home.
And so I can remember, Andy, being, in between shots with you on the set. I'm in my trailer and I'm calling up doctors and I'm trying to figure out what we're going to do, because now the cancer had come back and this is an incurable cancer. This is a cancer with no drugs that have been effective against killing those tumors. And on the phone in between scenes, trying to find solutions, for our son. What's our course of action going to be when I get home, and what's Mac going to start doing? And I'm talking to the doctors about the treatments that we're going to try, and all of these things. And that became very, very difficult. He was working for the foundation, Gary Sinise Foundation, at the time, so he was still able to go to work. He's doing his treatment. He's going to work. He's doing his treatment. He's going to work. By the end of 2019, I had a couple more jobs. I think I had one more job to finish up in the fall of 2019. And then in 2020, he had to go back in for another spine surgery on his neck. And then that was January of 2020. By June, he was back in the hospital again. So he was in for 2 months after the neck surgery. Then he's back in June, and he's in for 4 months with a thoracic spine issue that they had to take more tumor off his spine. So it was getting very, very difficult. I had to stop acting. That was the last year I did anything. And I just had to focus on Mac. As you said, he was just a tremendous drummer,
sweet
tremendous musician. He started drumming when he was 9 years old.
Wow.
And in fact, I have a video of the first time I put him on the drum set. And I taught him the basic rock beat, and he could do it right away. And then I put on a piece of music that had that basic rock beat, and he started playing along with it. And I just filmed him. And this is my son. He's just got a natural gift for putting his foot together with his hands and being able to do it.
That's incredible.
And he did it right away at 9 years old. And and then he just kept playing drums all the way through high school.
Man.
And then in college, he went to USC Music School. He was an honor student there at USC Music School, where he really started getting into songwriting and composing.
Yeah.
And he wrote some tremendous music in college, and then he put it away. And, some of it they got done. Like if you go to his YouTube channel, you'll see a little animated short film called Luna and Lars. And that film is based on music that he wrote. A friend of his was so inspired, she wrote a script, and then they shot it, and it became a movie.
Wow.
And it's on his YouTube channel, a beautiful little 5-minute short based on this piece of music that he wrote in college. At the same time he wrote that, he wrote a piece called Arctic Circles, and then he put it away and didn't do anything with it. Then the cancer hit, and he became so disabled in 2020 that he couldn't play drums anymore, obviously, and it was all about fighting cancer now.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's about fighting cancer. And then in early 2023, last year, he said to me, "Dad, there's this piece of music that, I think I want to try to work on it and try to finish it." And he hadn't been thinking about music much at all, and he said, "Do you think Dan Myers is my violin player in my band, and they'd done some things together in the past. Do you think Dan would help me flesh it out a little bit and sort of try to figure it out?" So Dan started working with it on a little bit. Then my keyboard player, Ben Lewis, got involved and started, putting it down. Mac would give him the charts and put it down. He'd record it. And then he connected with an old college buddy, composer, pal named Oliver Schnee. And Oliver's dad is like a world famous sound mixer, right? He's mixed everybody and done every big celebrity and star, the Beatles and all these people. And they got Bill to mix this piece. So Oliver and Mac finished Arctic Circles, and they went into the studio in June or July of 2023, and they recorded Arctic Circles. At the same time, they recorded Mac playing harmonica on an old American folk classic, Shenandoah.
Wow.
And Mac plays harmonica on Shenandoah, backed up by a string section.
Man.
And they they shot it for video and put
Yeah.
it on his YouTube channel, which now has Arctic Circles now has over 102,000 views
That's amazing.
for this piece.
That's amazing.
And then when we got here to Nashville, they went in the studio and did more music. Mac said, "You know what? That was so cool. I want to do a whole record."
Wow.
So when we got to Nashville in November, they went into the studio, recorded more music, more original music, and some songs like where Mac's playing harmonica. And Mac envisioned an album of music that he calls Resurrection and Revival.
Man.
And it's all about taking something old and resurrecting it and bringing it back to life, reviving it with new life. And so there's some old folk songs like Red River Valley on there and stuff. Red River Valley is a song that his mom used to sing to him when he was little and sing to the girls. And he put that on the record because of his mom. And she's the one who actually suggested that he get the harmonica and start playing the harmonica because he couldn't play drums anymore. He's paralyzed in his right hand, but he could still pick up a harmonica. And he taught himself how to play.
Huh.
And so this album now, when we put that story on the Gary Sinise Foundation website about Mac, we put a link on there for pre-sales for the album because he wanted any proceeds from this record, and he never envisioned it like being a big seller or anything like that. But he said, "Dad, if anybody ever buys it, we can have the proceeds go to the Gary Sinise Foundation."
Wow.
So now he's got over 2,000 pre-orders.
I'm one of them. I ordered it last night.
There you go. You've taken it over the top.
I go to 2001. It was it's so exciting even the name of the album has such spiritual significance at this point. I mean, the idea of resurrection and revival, and just being able to have the voice that he does, even though he's in heaven now, being able to still have something to say. And I think that's just such a tremendous gift that you gave him, and that he got to give you. It was a beautiful thing for him to be able to have that final say on what he wanted to be remembered for. It was beautiful.
Seeing what happened to him in his final months, and we didn't know they were going to be his final months until I took him to the hospital, and it started to become clear what we were facing. Yeah. But in his final months, like I said, it was November. He went into the hospital December 29th. And in early November, he was in the studio recording, finishing all the music for Resurrection and Revival. Mac was a very faithful guy. I mean, Catholic, spiritual, faithful guy. And his Catholic faith and all the study he had done and everything that he was getting from Scripture and everything like that it just prepared him for acceptance. And I'm learning more and more about that as I'm discovering these things on his iPhone and on his iPad, and I'm finding all this stuff that he wrote and messages that he left that he wrote and recorded. To be read or viewed after he was gone. Mm-hmm. And it's comforting because I know he was at peace with what was going on. He didn't want to go. Mac really wanted to fight, and he kept trying to fight, but he was also very realistic about, this is an incurable cancer and my tumors are getting bigger. You can see them on his body and on his face, and they weren't getting smaller no matter how many treatments we had tried. So he was kind of very practical about where he was going. Yet when you read some of this stuff and in talking to him when he was still alive and everything like that, you just knew that Mac had this amazing grace going on that was beautiful. And that's one of the things I'm trying to share.
Yeah.
Because Mac so many people have cancer and so many people go through difficulties, and um, the way he faced it, and the things that he left us,
Mm.
and the gifts that he left, and the way he left them to us was very positive and a tremendous blessing to us. And then what's happened since, since I kind of decided to share his story, the outpouring of messages that
Yeah.
we've received.
I mean, it's been fun to watch. It's been amazing.
Just millions of people have seen the story that I wrote, and thousands have written in, and that all of that has been a real uplift for a family who's grieving.
Yeah.
Mac discovering more and more each day on how he was dealing with it, emotionally and internally, and then the outpouring of love and support that we've received has helped one family who's dealing with cancer get through it a little easier.
Man, thanks for sharing that. As your friend, it's been a privilege to walk through just a little bit of it with you. And I know there's a lot of other friends. You're not lacking in friends and it's because you've been a good friend. But just to walk through it has been a privilege, because it's painful and it is not to be trivialized. But there is this beauty in it, because it's a family that you guys love each other. I think you were a tremendous father to Mac, and I know he was a tremendous son to you. And so I think to be able to have the music still speak to that, it's just, I think, something beautifully redemptive. I think there is a resurrection and revival kind of quality to it in terms of life, not just the songs. And it does resurrect his voice. And so that's a beautiful thing. For anybody that wants to get it, you can get it on the Gary Sinise Foundation website, pre-order it. I pre-ordered mine last night. Highly recommend it. I think you'll definitely hear the emotion and heart of what Mac was trying to say.
Just I've learned from him. I've been inspired by him, and I love him, so much, and I'm proud to be his dad, and proud to be able to help him fulfill this dream that he had. But it was his vision, his thing, and he did it at the end. He was happy in his final days.
It's so beautiful. I mean, Mac was a storyteller, and I think he comes from a storyteller. And I think, some people express that through notes on a page, and some people express that with words in a script. But, storyteller quality, it communicates to the soul regardless of if there's words. And he had that ability, and I'm excited for the world to continue to get to see that and hear that. And I'm excited for you to be able to have that connection to him. I think those stories are the ones that change lives. And I think you've, over the years, introduced us to stories to kind of consider. And the one that we're developing, we don't have time to get into now, but is you sent me a book about 5 years ago and said if I was a younger man I would direct this, but this needs to be your next movie. And it was a book called Fearless. And it's a Navy SEAL story, but it's the redemption story of Adam Brown, another man that speaks even though he's gone. And so, I'm excited to explore that one with you. We've pursued the rights, we have it, and you're going to be an executive producer on it and going to be in the film. We're still working out all the details, but I called you early on, and I was like, I texted you, and I usually am really, because so many people, when there's somebody of your level, pitch you stuff all the time. And I try to be sensitive to that. And so I sent a text to you. I was like, hey, Gary, I'm doing Fearless and I want to get off the ground, but it really helped to attach you as an executive producer and, let you read the script and pick whatever part you want to play. And I said, so is that okay? And then it was crickets for about an hour. And I was like, I was like, oh, dang it. I pushed it too far. I hope I didn't offend him. So I texted you. I was like, Gary, your friendship means more to me than any kind of role. And if it's too much to ask, and then you interrupted me and you texted back, you're like, Andy, this is Fearless we're talking about. You just tell me what role I have to compete for. So, it was fun. I was on set of The Terminalist this week to catch up with my buddies, Jared Shaw and Chris Pratt and Jack Carr. And, they were speaking into the story, and I was watching how they were doing some things they use a lot of real former operators on that show, and just trying to see how the SEAL function as a unit the SEALs did. And so I'm excited for things to come. I know that one's special to your heart too.
Well, Andy, I love working with you on McQueen, and also I still believe it was wonderful. So you if you want to find something for me,
you always find something for you. You pick whoever you want. If you play, if you want to play one of the SEALs, we'll make it work with the Harrison Ford technology.
We've got the oldest SEAL in history over here. He's the oldest guy.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it.
I remember where I was when I finished that book. I was doing a concert. I think I was in North Carolina or somewhere, and I may have been doing a concert that night at Fort Bragg or something, and I decided to go for a walk in town and take the book with me and just get a coffee and sit down and finish it. And I finished it. It just took my breath away, and really, I closed it. I was so moved by it, and it was given to me by Kelly Brown.
Yeah,
and,
she's amazing.
Adam's
widow.
Wife, and. I read it. And I thought, oh God, I'd love to do something with this. But as time went on, it just became clear to me that, I wasn't going to do it. And then we got to know each other, and I thought you're the guys that should make this movie for sure. And I'm glad you read it. I'm glad you liked it. I'm glad you went after it, and I'm glad you're going to do it.
It's going to be awesome when we do. It's going to be great. Last question as we finish up. I always love to, ask, what was the first film that impacted you? The first film that you can remember that you just, it grabbed you?
First film. Well, first film was 101 Dalmatians, I think. If you want,
that's incredible. I love it. That's such a perfect answer. Yes, the animated 101 Dalmatians.
Yeah, if you want the very first film,
I love it. The whole thing has been fueled by 101 Dalmatians.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
I think I was probably, I don't know, that's back in the 60s.
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah. Well, Gary, I consider you not just a master storyteller, but you're a dear, dear friend. You've impacted my career and that of my brother. Don't know that we'd be doing any of this had it not been for you speaking into our life multiple times along the journey, encouraging us not to lose heart. Because when we started, the idea of doing films that had faith in it was ridiculous. And now to see the moments in time, not just for us, but for other filmmakers that are like us, that are representing who we are and what we believe in a way that is getting opportunities. And that didn't exist 15 years ago. And so have so much gratitude, but even more so for the man that you are. And, you're the best of us. And I consider you one of my dearest friends. And it's a privilege to have you on the podcast today to share stories, my friend.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you. Give my best to John and everybody,
Love you, brother.
Appreciate it.
So that's the show today. I want to thank my friend Gary Sinise. Gary is one of those guys that, like, if he ran for president, I would wholeheartedly follow this man. Like, anything that he led, I would be front lines being a part of. I believe in him, inside and out. He is absolutely the genuine thing. He just all the things that we talked about, we're just scratching the surface of the impact that not only he's made on the industry, but on my life personally. So grateful to have a few minutes to talk with Gary. It's always a delight. I think the thing about Gary that really sticks out to me is the idea of being able to have an impact, not just with the stories that you tell, but how you utilize that platform to influence and impact others. This is a guy that after Forrest Gump began to see the impact that he had on veterans and people that had been wounded in service of our country. He began to kind of explore that. 9/11 happens, and then it solidifies his position that I want to be a part of standing up for veterans and people that serve our country in ways that the Vietnam generation didn't get to experience. And then him to be able to really continue to utilize all of his influence, all of his energy, and all of his resources, into telling those kind of stories. And then to see that DNA transferred to his son, Mac. And as his son, Mac, faced his own battles, being able to give away his music to inspire others and to tell stories in order for him to leave that behind for all of us. I think that has such tremendous value. So I just want to thank Gary for being a part of this. And as you guys as storytellers, I would encourage you to not just focus on the stories you tell, but who are you going to impact along the way? What are the things that have lasting value? And it's not about the fame. It's not about the notoriety. It's not about being praised. It's really about the people you impact along the way as you tell your stories. So that's our show today. I want to thank you guys for being a part of this. Love having you all along for the journey. We'll see you on the next episode of The Storytellers.
The Storytellers is a Kingdom Story Company production. It is produced by Nick Carey, with production assistance from Ben and Justin Bailey, and creative assistance from Jaron Weatherly and Beach Approach. Our executive producers are Kevin Downs and Brandon Gregory. Social media for the show is run by the Troops and Allies team, and our music is Twisted Rooster by Tommy Prophet. Special thanks to our entire team at Kingdom Story Company. To make sure that you never miss out on any of our exciting guests, subscribe to The Storytellers for free on YouTube at Kingdom Story Company or wherever you listen to podcasts. For exclusive first looks at our upcoming films, behind-the-scenes content, and invitations to advanced screenings, join the conversation as a Kingdom Insider at KingdomStoryCompany.com and follow us at Kingdom Story Company across all platforms. As always, thanks for joining Andrew Erwin and his friends on The Storytellers.